The Dark Tournament is what Yu Yu Hakusho is most known for, and for very good reason. It's chock full of fun characters and exciting battles, rife with ups and downs for our protagonists. And while I wouldn't change anything about the tournament itself, it is fun to speculate on what alternate matchups might have looked like. So today, at the request of Celestial Tier member Brandon, we're going to explore one of these alternate universe matchups and ask ourselves, what if Risho had fought Yusuke instead of Kuwabara? Speaking of Patreon, if you'd like to show some support, you can follow the link in the description or the pinned comment. Don't forget that until the end of the year, you can use discount code JUPITER to get 50% off your first month in the Celestial Tier, which will allow you to request a specific video topic just like this one. And hey, if you can't, a like and subscribe also go a very long way in helping the channel out. While I was in the process of editing this video, StephenPD101 jumped up to the Celestial Tier, so I wanted to insert a quick shout out to you, my dude. I look forward to seeing if there's a video topic you'd like to see me cover, but for now, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Now, before we dive into this hypothetical, we should revisit who Risho is and what he's capable of. Risho is the leader of Team Masho, a sect of underworld shinobi who operated as mercenaries for hire. As far as his role on the team itself, it's clear that Risho is the architect and the brains behind the operation. He's shown to be conniving and manipulative with no regard for honor so long as victory is obtained. We're also shown that Risho is more than capable of assessing situations quickly to steer the outcome, as we saw with him forcing Bakken to set Kurama outside the ring. Also shown that Risho is such a string of sounds. Lastly, Risho has an obvious arrogance to him that influences how he engages with situations and people. Setting his personality aside, Risho has two distinct techniques that we get to see in action, the Armor of Clay and the Meteor Strike. The Armor of Clay is mostly what it sounds like, allowing him to encase himself in an armor made of dirt and stone. The armor can then be layered upon to increase its durability, though to what upper limit we're never shown. What's important about this armor though is that while it does presumably boost his defense, it also turns his entire body into a weapon thanks to the many jagged spikes coming off of it. The Meteor Strike is a technique that's made possible through donning the aforementioned armor. By launching himself into the air with demon energy, he then propels himself at his enemy like, well, a meteor. Given that Risho is the leader of Team Masho, we can also assume that he's capable enough in combat that Jin and Toya wouldn't second guess him, despite him being more notably characterized as the tactician. So now that we have a better understanding of Risho, let's look at the circumstances of this matchup. In a reality where these two do fight, Yusuke is coming right off the back of a hard-fought victory over Jin. Without the meddling of Budajiri, the previous match isn't ruled a double loss, and Yusuke maintains his eligibility to fight. With no time to rest in between fights, Yusuke is thrown right into the thick of it with Risho. We have to keep in mind that Yusuke is exhausted by this point thanks to his battle against Jin, so his reserves of spirit energy are most likely depleted. Between firing his spirit gun multiple times and closing with the spirit wave, Homeboy is spent. And I think Risho would pick up on this, so I have a feeling he would start the fight the same way he started the fight against Kuwabara, by just throwing hands. But much to Risho's dismay, Yusuke being out of spirit energy does not mean he's out of options, as our boy is no stranger to brawling. Hell, the Knife Edge deathmatch was a direct result of both men changing gears because they were completely out of spirit energy. However, Yusuke is also really good at noticing the flaws in an enemy's personality. So he would use Risho's arrogance against him, goading him into making mistakes so that he could go on to punish them with powerful blows. It would only take one or two solid shots from Yusuke for Risho to realize he needs to take things a bit more seriously. And while he may not use the Armor of Clay in its entirety just yet, we do know that he's capable of summoning individual segments of it. This would give him better defense against Yusuke's ever-changing approach, but I do think he'd eventually be given no choice but to fully don the armor to push back against Yusuke's resilience. Even if we do want to give Yusuke a bit of wiggle room and say that he manages to somehow gather enough energy to fire off a spirit gun, further exhausting himself, it's most likely that it wouldn't pack enough of a punch to end the fight. It may even be a direct hit that carries Risho out of the ring, but the Armor of Clay would protect him just enough that he'd still be injured, but he wouldn't be immediately KO'd. At which point Risho's patience would essentially vanish, and he would add extra layers to the armor, which would put Yusuke at even more of a disadvantage. Despite his own strength, punching spikes would still be painful, closing off easy paths to victory for Yusuke. Having those spikes at his disposal will give Risho extra options too. Aside from just bludgeoning Yusuke with his fists, he would now be able to pierce or slash him as well. All of this will culminate into the reveal of the Meteor Strike, which would push the battle into its endgame. And from here I'm honestly a bit torn, because there are two potential ways for this battle to conclude. On one hand, we could allow Yusuke to tap into life energy the way he did against Suzaku to pull out the win against Risho. This would keep Yusuke quote-unquote worthy in Togoro's eyes, since in the actual story, he didn't hold Yusuke's loss to Risho against him. On the other hand, I don't really like the idea of robbing Kuwabara of one of his few wins in the series as a whole. So having him come out as the last bastion of hope for Team Urameshi after a rare loss from Yusuke could be very interesting not just for the story but for their dynamic. Having observed Yusuke and Risho's match, he'd have a better understanding of what he was up against, but he would still struggle. Despite his understanding of Risho's techniques, his injuries from earlier in the tournament would keep him on the back foot until Yukina pops up, at which point we'd be more or less back on track canonically. The consequences of that, though, is that Yusuke's loss would likely shift Togoro's perception of him, which would have untold ramifications on the remainder of the story arc as a whole. So instead of committing to either one of these in this what if, I'm going to leave it to you guys in the comments to decide which route you would prefer and why. I know that probably feels like a bit of a cop-out, but since this isn't one of those Masako X me changing the entire canon type of situations, I couldn't really decide which one I preferred. Not to mention, I'm just curious what you guys think and what the consequences of either scenario might be. Thanks again to Celestial Tier member Brandon for suggesting this what if. It was actually a lot of fun to just sit down and think through the scenario. If you'd like to suggest a video topic that gets prioritized over my standard workload, consider becoming a Celestial Tier member over on Patreon. From now until the end of the year, you can get 50% off your first month as a Celestial by using discount code Jupiter. Well, my camera overheated, so I guess I'm doing this in post. As always, a thank you to all of the wonderful people who continue to show their support via Patreon. With a huge shout out to all of our Celestial Tier members, including, of course, Brendan Carlson, This One Snick, Totally Reasonable Curb, and Trey Hardy. Remember to take care of yourselves and others, stay warm out there, I'll see you all again soon, and as always, thanks for watching.